All right, let's get right into it. You've definitely heard of OPPO and vivo, right? Maybe you're even watching this on one of their phones. I mean, they're two of the biggest smartphone brands in the world. But the story behind them, how they're actually connected, and the super mysterious tycoon who started the whole thing, yeah, that's a story that almost nobody knows. So let me ask you a question. When you hear the words Chinese smartphone, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Because for a long, long time, there was a pretty common answer. And let's just say it wasn't exactly a compliment. You know the one. The stereotype was pretty simple. Cheap copies, low quality. The kind of phone you'd buy if you couldn't afford one of the big-name brands. But the reality? Oh, the reality today is a completely different story. We're talking about brands that are now famous for pushing the boundaries with some seriously cutting-edge innovation. Okay, let's take OPPO, for instance. They were the first company to create a 50-megapixel photo on a phone. But here's the brilliant part. The camera sensor itself wasn't 50 megapixels. Instead, when you hit that shutter button, the phone instantly takes 10 pictures and then uses AI to stitch them together into this one giant, super detailed image. That's not copying anything. That is pure, genuine invention. And charging? Don't even get me started. OPPO developed technology that gives you 2 hours of talk time from just 5 minutes of charging. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. 5 minutes. That can literally be the difference between a dead phone and getting that one critical call through. It's an absolute game changer. And then you've got Vivo. Remember when the first phones with in-screen fingerprint readers came out? That feeling like something straight out of a sci-fi movie? Well, Vivo made that magic happen. They were the first ones to actually put it in a phone you could buy. A feature that, the huge players like Apple and Samsung ended up using in their own top-tier phones later on. So, how is it that these two companies, who are supposed to be fierce rivals, both became pioneers of this kind of edgy, world-first technology? Well, the answer is this group that some people in the industry call the BBK Mafia. And yeah, it sounds a little intense, but it's the absolute key to this whole thing. Because these companies, they're secretly part of the same family. So this family has a name. It's called the BBK system, named after the original company, BBK Electronics. But this is not your typical corporation. Not at all. It's more like a collection of really independent companies. You've got OPPO, you've got vivo, and a few others, and they all trace their origins back to a single founder and his totally radical way of doing business. And the guy at the center of it all, his name is Duan Yongping. People call him China's most mysterious tycoon. And for good reason. I mean, after building a billion-dollar empire, he did something that was just unthinkable. He retired at 40 years old. He packed up, moved to the US, and just started playing golf. But his story starts way before that. In a China that was a very, very different place. Look, the story of how BBK, OPPO, and vivo even exist, it is the story of Duan Yongping. And it's this wild, unlikely tale of a rebel genius who kind of failed his way to the top and became this absolute master at turning what everyone else saw as a weakness into a huge, huge strength. Just look at this career path. It's absolutely incredible. In 1977, he fails the big national college entrance exam. For most people back then, that's a dead end. Game over. But just 1 year later, boom, he's in a top-tier university. Then, by the time he's 28, they hand him a factory that is just bleeding money. A few years later, it's a massive success. And then, get this, at the absolute peak of that success, he quits on principle. And this all leads up to him retiring, a billionaire, at just 40. It's just a wild, wild ride. So, back at that failing factory, Duan has this totally radical idea. He wants to sell a video game console. The only problem? This is the early 90s in China, and parents there viewed video games as basically electronic poison. The thing that was guaranteed to destroy their kids' future. So what do? How do you sell a product when the people with the money, the parents, absolutely hate it? His solution was just genius. Pure genius. Okay, so first, he clones the super popular Nintendo Famicom, but then came the masterstroke. He added a keyboard. And he bundled it with educational software. So now he wasn't selling a toy. He was selling the little tyrant learning machine. All of a sudden, parents weren't buying a time-wasting game console. They were investing in an educational computer to help their children succeed. It became an absolute must-have, and it turned Duan into a total superstar. But here's the thing. Even with all that success, Duan's whole philosophy on business was the complete opposite of what everyone else was doing. He had this crazy idea about how to build an empire, not by holding on to all the power and money for himself, but by giving it all away. And when he started his next company, BBK, he actually did it. He put this radical idea into practice. So he starts out owning like 70% of the company. But then, bit by bit, he starts selling his shares for cheap or just straight up giving them away to his most important employees. By the end of it, he only owned 10% of his own company. Think about that. He gave away the majority of his own business because he believed the people actually doing the work were the ones who deserved to own it. Back then, that was just completely unheard of. And let me be clear, this wasn't just some nice PR move. This was a core principle he was willing to blow up his career for. Remember that first company he made super successful, the one that made the little tyrant? Well, he walked away from it. Why? Because the bosses refused to let him give shares to the employees. For him, it was never just about the money. The whole situation, in his own words, just went against his principles. And that idea, that belief in fairness, that became the foundation for everything BBK would become. And Duan didn't stop at just sharing money. He shared power. He would find his best people, his protégés, and put them in charge of whole divisions of the company. And then he did something even crazier. He let them spin those divisions off into their own, totally independent companies. So his audio and video division, run by a guy named Chen Mingyong, that became OPPO. His telecommunications division, led by Shen Wei, that became Vivo. He even mentored another guy, Huang Zheng, who went on to create the massive e-commerce company Pinduoduo. See, he wasn't trying to build one giant empire for himself. He was building leaders, and then he was setting them free. So you might be asking, why does any of this matter? I mean, this guy has been retired for over 20 years. Well, it matters because his entire philosophy, that culture of letting people take charge, of being independent, of rewarding real innovation, it is literally baked into the DNA of every single phone that OPPO and vivo make today. So what's the big takeaway here? Well, first off, OPPO and vivo are not just copycats. Far from it. They are the result of a totally unique system that's literally designed to create innovation. Yeah, they came from different places. OPPO from audio and video, vivo from telecommunications, but they share that same core belief. You trust your people and you let them take big swings. And because of that, their edgy tech often gives us a sneak peek of where the whole industry is going to be in a few years. This whole thing, it's about way more than just phones. It's a story about a completely different way to run a business, one that values people more than profits. And all of this leaves us with one last question to chew on. We just peeled back the curtain on two of the biggest brands out there and found this incredible human story, a story about principles and doing business differently. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other hidden stories are out there quietly shaping the technology that we use and maybe even take for granted every single day?